Well, good morning. And it's an absolutely beautiful morning down here in the southwest of England. And apparently it's forecast to continue through to certainly the end of next week. So, hey, let's make the most of this Indian summer. Although, if you're in the northwest of England, there's little doubt that United Utilities are getting somewhat desperate for rainfall, considering the fact that the reservoirs in the northwest are looking decidedly low, to put it mildly. And I did address this issue on Fracking Nightmare last night. And so don't be at all surprised if we see that United Utilities are talking about introducing or reintroducing a hosepipe ban. Of course, they were going to introduce a hosepipe ban from the end of the first week of August, but it would seem under some external pressure because of the political sensitivity of a hosepipe ban in the northwest, where Cuadrilla had been granted permission to go ahead with the first frack in the UK since Cuadrilla had fracked, literally and metaphorically, Priest Hall back in 2011. So water shortages in the northwest are very much, I think, should be very much on people's minds right now. However, it is the morning of Friday, September the 7th, and it's certainly a morning to recognise the momentum of the anti-fracking campaign, and also the campaign by politicians of all parties to return to the concept of localism, that much vaunted policy put forward initially by David Cameron and now trotted out by the Tories. And it should, of course, be precisely what they want to push as a philosophy, i.e. Pushing decision making down to the lowest possible level, unless, of course, the industry lobbies to the extent where basically they decide that localism isn't going to work and they need to make the decisions at central government level. And this is where permitted development comes in. And of course, this was the joint ministerial statement issued by Greg Clark and James Brockenshire back in May. And we are now in the consultation period where people have the opportunity to submit their responses to the proposal that fracking become permitted development. In other words, where the fracking company can simply acquire the land or reach an agreement with the landowner to have access to the land, establish a well site, drill, and they're not going to drill unless they have every intention of fracking. So don't for 1 minute believe the guff that says, well, it's only a well site, they're only going to drill, they're not going to frack, they're not drilling unless they intend to frack. Well, last night, an absolutely superb result was posted by Ryedale District Council following the debate on this joint ministerial statement. Ryedale District Council in North Yorkshire voted 26-0 with one abstention to oppose the proposition to make fracking permitted development. And of course, there are much wider implications here, because this would be the thin end of a very, very fat wedge, and could potentially result in pretty much anything the corporations wanted to do being made permitted development. We've already got a situation where phone masts up to nearly, I think just over 80 feet are now considered permitted development. In other words, the only thing the company has to do is advise the local council that they're simply going to erect this phone mast, and there's nothing that the local authority can do. And down here in the southwest a couple of weeks ago, a phone mast manifested right outside a primary school, and there was a massive protest by the parents, with some of the parents taking their children out of the school in concern over the health issues related to the proximity of the phone mast. So, we've already got it with the phone mast, and this is what they absolutely need for the rollout of 5G. Now they're trying it with fracking. What next? basically whatever they perceive that the local communities will oppose. So congratulations to all those who have been lobbying, campaigning, discussing, presenting to Ryedale District Council, and hopefully this is the result that we will see now right across the country. And Lee Rowley, the Conservative MP for North East Derbyshire, who has Eckington, a Marsh Lane, the Ineos well site within his constituency, he has established a debate, a parliamentary debate. I mean, it won't be in Parliament, it'll be in Westminster Hall. It'll be interesting to see how many MPs actually show up for this. But it is an opportunity for MPs to express their concerns at this unilateral statement by Greg Clark and James Brockenshire. But on the other hand, hopefully it will put the proverbial stick of dynamite under Tory councils right across the country and make them sit up and take notice of the fact that there are moves within their own party to centralise these contentious planning decisions. So last night I was back in the studio in Plymouth for the first time in I think about 7 weeks to do episode 118 of Fracking Nightmare, and the main feature of yesterday's broadcast was to look at the fraud perpetrated by people impersonating High Court bailiffs at the B&Q protection camp just off of Preston New Road. And the police were there. Of course, they always state that they're there to prevent a breach of the peace, but it was very evident that the police were there to assist these High Court bailiff impersonators to effect the eviction. And what we presented last night was an analysis of the documentation that had been presented to the protection camp and also to the police as genuine High Court orders. In reality, if they were, then there is a serious deterioration in the competence of the High Courts, because the errors on the documentation actually defy belief. In fact, it's truly remarkable that the police attempted to claim that the documents were genuine, when even a cursory examination would suggest that they were clearly false. So a phone number was also produced within the documentation, and I tried to contact this phone number but ended up having a text message exchange with whomever was at the other end, and that text message exchange proved to be rather interesting. And if you want to see the extent of that, then take a look at the link, which I'll put under this video, to last night's episode of Fracking Nightmare. So as a result of this, a formal complaint has now been lodged with Lancashire Police, and Chief Inspector Ogle, who we understand was the Silver Commander responsible for sending officers down to the B&Q camp to support the bailiffs, has been advised of the concerns over this documentation, and in fact a crime reference number has been requested as a result of the complaint that's been submitted. Now, imagine if the boot was on the other foot. Imagine if a group of protectors rocked up in black overalls with badges that said High Court enforcement, and effectively attempted to evict, say, Quadrilla from their offices. You know, obviously that the police would be all over that like flies on the smelly stuff. But because it's protection camp, the police don't even look at the documentation. If they did look at the documentation and they realized it was fraudulent before they went down to B&Q, then obviously there's even greater concerns. So hopefully this should be putting the police on notice that the protectors will not be bullied, and they will not fall for infantile scams such as attempting to evict a camp with false documentation. And I also discussed the IGAS injunction, which we do recognise is a genuine High Court order, but it was presented to Justice Morgan, the same judge in the London High Courts who presided over the INEOS injunction hearing. So how on earth can this be considered to be fair? Because Justice Morgan clearly has a preconceived outcome to the IGAS injunction application. So later today, I will be writing to the High Court, and I would encourage others to do the same, to request or invite, let me choose my words very carefully, to invite Justice Morgan to recuse himself. Now, this isn't casting any aspersion on the integrity of Justice Morgan. It is simply trying to ensure that, at the very least, the charade of justice can be seen to be done by having a judge to preside over the proceedings who has not been involved in any previous ruling based on the application for an injunction against peaceful protest. So Justice Morgan, do the right thing, step down and pass this to one of your colleagues that will be coming at this fresh and with hopefully an open mind, because unfortunately the reality is, whether you state that you are a professional and you are a long-standing member of the judiciary, the reality is that there will always be doubt about the integrity of a decision, because we know basically, based on your decision for INEOS, that you're simply going to rubber stamp the IGAS. You're going to go through the charade of a 1, 2, 3 day hearing, and then you're going to simply rubber stamp the IGAS application because you set your own precedent with the INEOS application. So, let's at least try and maintain the charade of justice for a while longer. Now, last night I also did an episode of Humanity versus Insanity, and a slightly different subject, but along the same lines of the corporatocracy attempting to ride roughshod over parliamentary law. And on Humanity versus Insanity, I was joined by David Noakes. Now, David was the producer of GC-MAF up until late 2014, when the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority arbitrarily and unilaterally raided his premises, not just in the UK, but right across Europe, and shut down his manufacturing facilities for GC-MAF, which is a proven, extremely effective cancer treatment. Now, David has had his bank accounts frozen now for nearly 4 years, pending a court trial regarding his production of unlicensed medicines. The MHRA are not interested in the efficacy of GC-MAF. They're not interested in the fact that GC-MAF is proven to be an extremely effective cancer treatment. The MHRA, which is a government entity, is there to protect the interests of Big Pharma, just like the Oil and Gas Authority, which is an entity of the government, is there to protect the interests of the oil and gas industry. Now, David Noakes will be in court on November the 5th in Southwark Crown Court in London, and this is potentially going to be a 5-week trial where the MHRA are going to justify their decision to condemn some 200,000 people per year to death by cancer because they refuse to even consider the possibility that there is any effective treatment for cancer other than chemo and radiotherapy. And of course, that traces back to the 1939 Cancer Act, which was established to protect the Radium Trust. And here we are, nearly 80 years later, and still Big Pharma carries so much sway that the MHRA, which represents Big Pharma's interests, will condemn people to this horrendous treatment and ultimate death. So do take a look at that interview as well. And David Noakes actually presented at my Alternative View 6 conference some 3 years ago, shortly after his business had been shut down by the MHRA. So if you or anyone in your family or anyone you know has been condemned to death because the alternative effective treatments are frowned upon, just like cannabis has been for so long, but due to a recent campaign, now there are moves obviously to make the use of cannabis as a medicine legitimate within the UK. But what's it going to take to break through the 1939 Cancer Act? Well, this is yet another example of the extent to which the corporatocracy has control of the government in this country, whilst maintaining the charade of democracy. But of course, that democracy, that charade, can only be maintained provided the public acquiesce to the decisions being made by central government. So the reality is that your government, and certainly the corporations, thank us for our apathy. But fortunately, more and more people are starting to realize that they actually need to step up and challenge the absurdity of a corporatocracy which is based on greed and siphoning the wealth of the country into the offshore bank accounts of a very small number of people. We do have an opportunity to bring about the changes that we all know we need to see, but we have to participate. We have to get involved, and that's something that the politicians and the corporatocracy are very, very concerned about, which is why they are trying to restrict the reach of the alternative media. It's why they are imposing greater and greater censorship on information that doesn't support the official narrative. And to put it in a nutshell, what they don't want is people that are capable of independent thought. So over the weekend, please do your own research, because over the next few weeks, literally within the next 2 months now, we have the opportunity to resist the corporatocracy that's pushing fracking, that's pushing 5G, that's pushing LED street lighting, and refusing to permit effective cancer treatments to be available to people in the UK, forcing them to either go through chemo, radiotherapy, or simply just die. It's up to us. So on that note, have a great weekend, and I'll catch you at 8:30 on Monday morning.